I think that one of the symptoms of cultural disintegration is simply that people lose the ability to distinguish between dream and memory, and that somehow one's past, one's real past and one's dream past simply become one's past, and then under certain circumstances, what was basically dream material is presented as reality. What was basically dream material is presented as reality. What was basically dream material is presented as reality. My idea with psychedelics throughout my whole career with them was that the purpose was to go out into mind space and hunt ideas and bring something back to show the folks around the campfire, something that would astonish and amaze us all. Well, it's a narrow keyhole, the mind. You can't bring back a flower like the time traveler does in Wells' story. So I found the only thing I could bring back, not being graphically endowed, was ideas. It's a very mysterious business, the revelation to mind of the world. Since the last time I talked to any audience, I finally understood an argument of my enemies that I had never understood before. Enemies in the friendly, collegial, ideological sense. In other words, enemies. The countervailing theory to the evolution of consciousness, how it came to be so rapidly, as opposed to the idea that it was stimulated by psychedelic compounds in the early human diet, was, and I've ridiculed this idea to you before, the idea that human beings throw things. And because we were small and weak and we hunted very large animals, we learned to hurl rocks with great accuracy. And that this is a behavior not observed in the animal world. I mean, monkeys hurl feces in a generally downward direction to indicate displeasure, but their aim is lousy, which is a very fortunate thing if you're an Amazon explorer. But human beings can hit with considerable force an object up to 120 feet away. And evolutionary biologists have fastened on this as requiring so much coordination of neural material that there would be enough left over to invent Western civilization and explore the planets once you had this thing down. Well, it always seemed somewhat preposterous to me, and I pointed out that it would make the big league baseball pitcher the paradigm of evolutionary accomplishment in the human world if that standard were accepted. But now I understand the argument a little better, and it's slightly deeper than I thought, because here's what they were trying to say the first time. It isn't this neural coordination which is going on is really about planning. That it is an extraordinary thing to look at a rock in your hand and to make the calculation into the forward vector of the future. If I hurl back and impart a certain energy in a certain direction with a certain intensity, this thing will follow a path through space and will land somewhere with benign consequences to me and my side. And it's the key concept in here is plan. This is a plan. And animals don't do this. There are no plans. in the animal world. Their consciousness is of the moment and doesn't involve this complex triangulation out of the moment toward future consequences in quite this way. Because you see, what happens when you let go of the rock is that you can no longer control it. It isn't like hunting or beating something to death with a stick, where the strategy is being readjusted moment to moment. No, once the projectile is released from your hand, that's all the planning you get to do. So it represents a concrescence of intent. And this building toward the concrescence of intent, this plan making, then is the tiny flutter of the butterfly's wing that ripples out through the chaotic universe, and the next thing you know, the kings of Babylon are issuing their codes of law, and slaves under the lash are erecting cities, and the stars are being brought into a mathematical model, so forth and so on. Well, I just wanted to mention that I'm also working on a second book at the moment where we're going to go back into the psilocybin theory of the origin of consciousness and actually attempt to make a case that will demand attack. In other words, to actually marshal all of the anatomical, paleontological, primate data, because the more we research, the more it appears true that by looking at the psychedelics, in fact, they become a kind of key to understanding the entire phenomenon of human emergence by looking at the larger issue of food as an environmental dimension. In other words, our food has shaped us. As omnivores, we have exposed ourselves to a very high input of mutagenic material over the course of our omnivorous behavior. And this has accelerated the rate of mutation in our species. This is why there are so many cancers. Those cancers are maladaptive mutations. Most mutations are non-productive. But by being a creature of the jungle canopy, who underwent a forced migration to an entirely different nutritional environment, the grassland, we opened ourselves up to this mutagenic influence. And it's only the spectacular effect of the psychoactive compounds impacting on neural organization, cognition, and social organization that I focused on originally. But now the realization is beginning to ripple out through the evolutionary community that yes, this is the hidden factor, the mutagenic diet and the forced shift in environment. There are also ideologically unexpected twists and turns in all this. I've recently met a very interesting person. He's going to be my co-author on this evolution book, Philippe de Vaugelet. Some of you may know him. And he is a lover of animals. This guy has made a fortune in publishing books on reptile care. And if you have a broken iguana, he's the man to see. But he pointed out something to me very, very interesting, which goes against prevailing political correctness for sure, which is that browsing ungulate animals have absolutely no interest in the behavior of other animals. They couldn't give a hoot. Who's interested in the behavior of other animals are hunting animals. And that in order to successfully hunt an animal, you must, in a sense, be able to become it. You must be able to transfer your consciousness into it and imagine its motivations, its behaviors, so forth and so on. And so Philippe has convinced me that on one level, the earliest human consciousness was not human consciousness at all. It was primate ability to enter into the behavior patterns and psychologies of other mammals in the grassland environment that it was predating upon. Following vultures as a basis for the beginning of nomadism and this sort of thing. Obviously, predator animals are aware, and their evolutionary success is based on environmental awareness and being able to act based on inputting the behavior of other animals. This is a very complex mental world compared to the world of the fruitarian, leaf-eating canopy browser that we came from. And then it appears, that in a series of coalescing involutions of culture and neural organization, driven by the spatial coincidence of human beings, cattle, mushrooms, our original primate programming was restructured. And I've talked a great deal about this. I think this is the key to understanding at least our sexual politics. All primates have what are called dominance hierarchies. And this is where the hard-bodied, sharp-fanged males, young males, arrange everybody else to suit themselves. The elderly, the sexually available females, the young, homosexuals, the sick, everybody gets told where to stand and what to do. This is how primates operate. This is how we operate. However, I think that for a long period in human beings, this was interrupted by nutritional factors and drug factors in the environment. That in a sense, a human society that is using psilocybin on even a lunar cycle of use is suppressing the ordinary pattern of male dominance, hierarchical dominance. It's not genetically touching it. It's still there, but in the same way that if you give a population of aggressive people a lot of opium, aggression disappears. If you give a population of people a kind of psychedelic boundary-dissolving aphrodisiac that promotes group bonding and erodes monogamy and so forth, then you get a different social ambiance than if that weren't present. And I think the secret to understanding our curious relationship to the angelic and animal worlds has to do with the fact that under the influence of this hormone/enzyme, which was suppressing ordinary patterns of male dominance, consciousness underwent an extraordinary series of bifurcations. And language, theater, poetry, magic, religion, dance, music, ethical values, altruism, everything emerged, sometime between 35,000 and 10,000 years ago. The Paleolithic, the pre-agricultural era, an extraordinary period of novelty being expressed and conserved in the biological world. The primate species, the hominids, suddenly just take the stage, and through an amazing series of cultural transformations become a planet-ruling species by 10,000 years ago. And then, not content with that, the process doesn't slow down, it accelerates. And this has to do with the fact that we have somehow created, through language, a kind of adaptive strategy that is so flexible that, unlike most adaptive strategies, which sooner or later run into a blind box canyon and are just simply trapped there, butting their heads against the wall, you see it everywhere, the mussels down on the rocks, and most evolutionary developmental lines are dead ends. But somehow we broke free of that by ceasing to be defined by the physical body, which is the stuff upon which evolution works, and placing between ourselves and our environment a new thing called culture. We began to mediate evolution. Evolution says the infirm, the idiot, the lame must die. Culture says we have different values about this. Maybe yes, maybe no, but we will decide. Evolution says, you must be a scattered species, nomadic and moving across the surface of the planet like an animal. Culture says, no, we have strategies for food sequestration and common defense, and we will build cities and so forth and so on. And so, since about, pick a number, 10,000 years ago, evolution has not been the dominating factor, biological evolution. Instead, there is something else, which the word epigenetic has been suggested, meaning change not driven by genes. Our genes are the same. If you were to be with a group of people active 10 to 15,000 years ago, they would look and just like you and I. We haven't changed that much. We've mixed the genes, but we haven't particularly added new ones or lost genes. But in the epigenetic realm, how many languages have been generated over the past 10,000 years? How many world religions have come and gone? How many systems of government? How many theories of polity and society? We just furiously cast these things off. And beginning about 500 years ago, this phenomenon was embraced as a permanent aspect of human existence in Western Europe, and the concept of progress became enshrined. And progress is the idea that this process must go on, be extended, and accelerated everywhere. And now it seems to be happening. I think, and as a consequence of this acceleration of process, all the contradictions in the old system, and I mean reaching back to Egypt, all the contradictions in the old system are now on the surface. And because I believe psychedelics are a kind of higher dimensional sectioning of reality, I think they give the kind of stereoscopic vision necessary to hold the entire hologram of what's happening in your mind. The old paradigm is gone. I mean, we can talk about how different parts of it died. Maybe not everybody knows the story of how physics, the paradigmatic science of reason, turned into a place where nothing makes any sense at all, and where stories are told so wild that a surrealist painter would flee from the gathering just shaking his head. That's physics. The very bedrock of the whole Western shtick has turned into a place of utter psychedelic contradiction and chaos. And the news hasn't reached biology and psychology. They're still operating under different paradigms. But what is keeping science alive at this point is the fact that it is able to whore itself to the marketplace. But in terms of the old program, which was providing some kind of metaphysical recitation of the nature of the universe, it's pretty clearly out of reach at this point. I mean, the universe has been discovered to be stranger than you can suppose. And what this means to the troops, which is you and me, the citizens of these linear, print-created, scientism-ruled, democratic, industrial states, what it means to us is that you get your mind back. They have no need of it anymore. It's actually become a burden to them. I mean, yes, they struggled like hell to take it, but then they discovered that it really wasn't worth all that much anyhow. The great thing about living in the twilight of an imperial decline is the permission that exists. You know, incredible resources lay before us, and very few people are looking over your shoulder and telling you what to do. I mean, the fact that this community has been able to persist and exist, I mean, this is the Orphic community. This is the tradition of dissent, ecstasis, sexual ambiguity, so forth and so on, that reaches right back to Chalcolithic Greece and beyond. I mean, shamanism is about shape-shifting. Shamanism is about doing phenomenology with a toolkit that works. And no religion, no philosophy, I think, has ever gone very far down the road of understanding. Understanding is not really a collective enterprise. Understanding is an individual enterprise. And you know, you can read Husserl and you can become a Hasid, or you can assimilate these group understandings that are forms of wisdom. But ultimately, those are platforms for intrepid exploration. And now, at the end, I think, of this entire enterprise, I mean, I don't know whether I'm changing or the world is changing or both, but it has gotten so rich recently that it's like an enormous meal at some over-reviewed restaurant where you just have to push yourself away and say, you know, the spectacle is endless and amazing, and apparently it's all going to come true. And my impulse is to distance myself from it all. I mean, it is, well, the mushroom said to me once, it said, this is what it's like when a species prepares to depart for the stars. This is not unusual. I mean, the earth quakes, the oceans boil, the planet came into existence for this. All life for over 1 billion years has been pointed toward taking this step. You know, leaving the oceans for the land was dress rehearsal for what will now be done. And, you know, it's chilling because it's so huge. I mean, you don't even know, well, it's just enormous. And yet, apparently, when you look back through the history of the universe, this is how it proceeds. Incredibly gradually, over staggering scales of time, but then every once in a while you come around the corner, and there it is. A continent sinks, an asteroid impacts, a star explodes, two intelligent species meet somewhere out in the cosmos. And these things then, you know, set ripples going for eons.
Cielo para soñar.